Alphabet, Google's parent company and owner of the YouTube platform, is negotiating to build a technology center in none other than Saudi Arabia. Sounds incredible, but the truth is that since Mohamed bin Salman, the crown prince, took over, this country has started to change a lot. At least much more than everyone would have imagined just a few years ago. So, dear viewer, today let's have a look at what exactly is happening in Saudi Arabia. To understand what's happening in Saudi Arabia, we need to take a look at their past to see where everything began. Well, first of all, we need to bear in mind that we're talking about a particularly young country here. Saudi Arabia was formally born in 1932. Then, of course, Saudi Arabia was really different to how it is today. You see, back then, many oil deposits hadn't yet been discovered, so it was a very poor place that still had a sparse, semi-nomadic population. Basically, Saudi Arabia was still kinda in the Middle Ages. Well, now that I think about it, really a lot of things haven't actually changed that much. But a few years later, in 1938, the first oil deposits were discovered, and since then, well, let's just say that the House of Saud, the country's royal house, has used oil to make Arabia look like the United States, at least in terms of aesthetics and leisure. So, well, allow me to explain myself. We're talking, for example, of cities inspired by Dallas, driving American cars, and building huge malls in the middle of the desert. And that's exactly what they did for decades. But not only that. Over the years, the Saudi government, who thanks to oil has begun to have a lot of money, came to a kind of agreement with Washington that has lasted more or less until today. So check out this agreement. Saudi Arabia generates a huge and relatively cheap oil supply using the dollar as its basic currency. I mean, you've probably heard of petrodollars, and accumulates all the money it generates in oil sales, in US Treasury debt, or in the big Wall Street banks. And if that weren't enough, the Saudi government is always willing to inject millions into the powerful US arms industry. That is, lots of oil, lots of money, and great business for the US military industry. So the question becomes, well, in exchange for what? Well, dear viewer, basically for protection. The House of Saud bought what essentially amounts to insurance from Washington to protect it from foreign enemies. However, in 1979, everything changed. You see, 1979 was a fundamental year for Arabian countries and for Islam. On the one hand, the Islamic Khomeini Revolution happened in Iran, and on the other hand, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and in Saudi Arabia, between November the 20th and December the 4th, a group of fanatics took over the Great Mosque of Mecca and accused the House of Saud, the Saudi monarchy, of betraying Islam and selling their soul to the West. Fanatics called for an uprising to overthrow the royal family. And there, dear viewer, is where everything changed. The House of Saud leaders feared a revolutionary uprising and decided to please the extremists. The United States could certainly protect them from a foreign enemy, but it would be very hard for them to do so in a popular uprising like the one that happened in Iran. So even though this part of the world wasn't exactly a paradise of freedom, from that moment on, things got a lot worse. Discrimination against women reached stratospheric levels. The religious guard began an uncontrolled campaign, and Saudi Arabia began to finance all kinds of extremist groups like there was no tomorrow, both inside and outside of the country. And, well, that's precisely the Saudi Arabia we all know. However, just wait a moment, because there was another turning point in 2015, this time thanks to plummeting oil prices and the arrival of a new king, Salman bin Abdulaziz.
It's a great pleasure to welcome His Majesty King Salman to the Oval Office.
This is a king who decided to give almost all the power to his son, and now his heir, Mohamed bin Salman, of who we already talked about here on VisualPolitik before. Thus, a new generation took a hold of the country.
My generation was held hostage by 1979. I know now that my kids will not be hostages. One Saudi banker to the New York Times.
Since then, folks, a new kind of revolution has been launched to modernize the country. We've already talked about this on this channel, but the truth is that the plan is advancing at full speed, and it's based on 3 pillars: the fight against corruption, economic change, and religious reform. So without further ado, well, let's see what's happening point by point.
Saudi Arabia's anti-corruption crackdown.
Saudi Arabia detaining 11 princes.
Nearly 60 detainees apparently removed, we're being told.
The fight against corruption.
The Crown Prince has said it both actively and passively. Corruption in Saudi Arabia is a great burden, and it has to end.
Our country has suffered a lot from corruption from the 1980s until today. The calculation of our experts is that roughly 10% of all government spending was siphoned off by corruption each year, from the top levels to the bottom. Crown Prince Mohamed bin Salman.
And you know what? As it was said, so it was done. Last November, that's 2017, princes, businessmen, ministers, ex-politicians, and a huge number of people were invited to dine with the king or to meet with the Crown Prince. Of course, it's only in a country like Saudi Arabia that we would see a prison like this. This is the Ritz-Carlton Riyadh, a very, very luxurious hotel. Of course, not everything was comfortable. After all, it became a prison that held such illustrious prisoners as Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, grandson of the kingdom's own founder, known as the Warren Buffett of the Middle East. This is a prince who, according to Forbes magazine, has a fortune of almost $18 billion and is one of Twitter's largest shareholders. Well, not even he, even with all his money, managed to escape. All the prisoners were held incommunicado and couldn't even contact their lawyers. Right? Legal guarantees? Come on, we're in Saudi Arabia. But what do you think the Saudi government asked for to release them? Well, nothing less than giving part of their fortunes and companies as compensation for all the corruption that they were involved in. And, well, here's a question. Do you know how much the Saudi government raised with this trick? Well, listen up, because this is an astounding number. It wasn't 1 or 5 or 10 billion, but it was approximately an eye-popping $107 billion. Of course, a few detractors have accused the Crown Prince of carrying out this campaign not with the intention of fighting corruption, but with the aim of strengthening his power and, for example, seizing control of foreign-based media. Yes, the detainees included important media businessmen. But, dear viewer, this doesn't end here. Not at all.
The economic change.
As we've mentioned on VisualPolitik, Saudi Arabia wants to emulate Dubai and leave their dependence on oil behind. And they want to do it hand in hand with private capital, just as we saw in Google's case. Of course, on the other hand, Prince Mohamed bin Salman is also very fond of big, heroic projects. The last one he publicized was Neom, a macro city that the Riyadh government wants to build in the Red Sea next to Jordan and Egypt. And check out some of these numbers. $500 billion in public and private investments in order to urbanize and build a city that is larger in area than El Salvador. This is a 10,000 square mile place that will have its own laws, its own courts, and its own taxes. This is a new city that the Crown Prince wants to turn into a great transport hub and a huge international business center. So basically, a much more modern and much bigger Dubai. And this isn't his only project.
Saudi Arabia plans a huge Red Sea beach tourism project. The project will cover 50 islands and 34,000 square kilometers, an area bigger than Belgium.
And there's a few more. Prince's idea is to get all these cities to have laws and standards different from those in the rest of the country. Laws that can attract investors, attract tourists, and entrepreneurs. The question is, will Riyadh really be able to make all of these projects work in a country that is so anchored in the past? With news like that, it doesn't seem easy at first, but I suppose we'll see. So far, people like Richard Branson certainly support this strategy.
The religious change.
Lastly, there's the religious change. The prince's latest and great obsession is the struggle against Islam's fundamentalism or its most radical interpretations. You see, Saudi Arabia is a country of restrictions, which is something we probably all know, and it may never cease being so. However, just a few years ago, nobody could have imagined we'd see so many changes and quite so quickly. Concerts and movies which had been banned have returned to the country. The religious guard has lost almost all of its power. Women can now attend sports stadiums, and since June, they can also drive. Without going on any further, on December 6, 2017, the Lebanese singer Hiba Tawaji starred in Saudi Arabia's first all-female concert. Yes, even the audience was entirely made up of women, and this is something we couldn't even have imagined just 3 years ago. Listen to this reflection.
We are privileged to be the generation that has seen the before and the after. The previous generation of Saudi women could never imagine a day when a woman could drive, and the coming generation will never be able to imagine a day when a woman couldn't. A 30-year-old Saudi woman social entrepreneur to the New York Times.
The person in charge of this entire process is Mohamed bin Salman.
We are restoring Islam to its origins, and our biggest tools are the Prophet's practices. At the time of the Prophet Muhammad, there were musical theaters, there was mixing between men and women, there was respect for Christians and Jews in Arabia. The first commercial judge in Medina was a woman. So if the Prophet embraced all of this, do you mean the Prophet was not a Muslim? Crown Prince Mohamed bin Salman.
For a Saudi Arabian leader to say something like this, well, the only word is wow. And by the way, don't think that Saudi Arabia was always the place it was in the past. Of course, it was always a very, very conservative country, too conservative certainly, but not the hell that it became in 1979. In short, as you can see, even though there's still a lot to change, things seem to be on the right track. Although, of course, there are certainly still dark areas. The Qatar blockade failure, the Yemen war, and the prince's obsession with Tehran.
Iran's supreme leader is the new Hitler of the Middle East. But we learned from Europe that appeasement doesn't work. We don't want the new Hitler in Iran to repeat what happened in Europe in the Middle East. Crown Prince Mohamed bin Salman.
Yes, this prince is a take charge kind of man, but to tell the truth, so far his international attempts have been resounding failures, as we saw with Yemen. Another problem is that the Arabic countries' economies are going from bad to worse. See, in 2017 they suffered their first recession since 2009, and public deficit is still skyrocketing, growing by more than $50 billion every year. And of course, that can make it hard for the prince to carry out his plans. In any case, having seen this, I think we can say that the oil fall was some of the best news for everyone, especially for Saudi Arabian women.
We are returning to what we have done before, a country of moderate Islam that is open to all religions and to the world. We will not spend the next 30 years of our lives dealing with destructive ideas. We will destroy them today. We will end extremism very soon. Mohamed bin Salman.
Anyway, that's how things are, but now it's your turn. Do you think Saudi Arabia will manage to change itself? Well, leave your answer in the comments below, as well as in this survey, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please do hit that like button if you did, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for brand new videos every Monday and Thursday. Also, don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. And as always, thank you for watching.